Good evening. I'm Ted Hodgkinson, Head of Literature and Spoken Word at Southbank Centre, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Queen Elizabeth Hall for this very special event in partnership with Intelligence Squared. I feel compelled to tell you that I have not been algorithmically generated as well. Tonight's debate focuses on one of the emergent fault lines of contemporary life, artificial intelligence, and asks whether it poses an existential threat to humankind. From the stark and even apocalyptic warnings of experts to the proliferation of AI-generated memes of the Balenciaga Pope or Donald Trump being arrested by a scrum of policemen, our culture is awash with AI-related noise, from disconcertingly convincing fakes to profound alarm about the future of humanity and the planet itself. How worried should we be? Do the benefits and even creative possibilities of artificial intelligence outweigh the negatives? Or is that wishful thinking, and are we plunging headlong into a crisis of our own making that might even come to dwarf the threat that the climate crisis poses? Tonight promises to cut through that noise and provide an incisive exploration of the broad range of possibilities, from the benefits and creative potentials of AI to the dystopian future in which machines turn against us or become too powerful to control. We're delighted to welcome a panel of globally renowned experts who are at the forefront of this debate: Carl Miller, Stuart Russell, and Dr. Eleanor Drage. As an art centre that exists to give the widest possible audience access to the arts, it was vital that tonight's discussion delves into the creative possibilities of AI, and we're delighted to have the groundbreaking Chinese-Canadian artist and researcher Sougwen Chung on the panel. Chung is considered a pioneer in the field of human-machine collaboration. Her work is truly spellbinding and challenges easy assumptions about the line between human and machine. In a moment, I'll hand over to your expert chair for this evening, Madhumita Murgia, a journalist, author, and the Financial Times artificial intelligence editor. She covers cutting-edge developments in AI globally and broader issues including surveillance, data privacy, and tech regulation. Her forthcoming book, Code Dependent, explores what it means to be human in a world that is rapidly changing thanks to the development of artificial intelligence. There will be time towards the end of the debate for audience questions, and if you'd like to ask something, please raise your hand, and if selected by Madhumita, one of my Southbank Centre colleagues will come to you with a microphone. As part of our ongoing commitment to making our talks and literature programme accessible, this event is being live captioned by Nicola Dutton. Many thanks to our partners at Intelligence Squared on their work from tonight's event, particularly to Connor Boyle, and to my colleagues at Southbank Centre, not least Karen Peterson, for managing the event tonight. Whether you're joining us for the first time or returning to Southbank Centre, we do hope you'll check out our programme of upcoming talks and spoken word events, including appearances from Marina Abramovich, Thomas Heatherwick, Teju Cole, Naomi Alderman, and many more. But back to tonight. Please welcome to the stage your chair for tonight's debate, Madhumita Murgia, who will introduce the panel and dive into the debate. Thank you.
Hello. I can't see anybody there, so very nice to have you all here, even though we can't really see. But we're hoping it's really full all the way to the back. Thank you so much for coming along today. This is a very exciting topic that I've been thinking about for a long time, can't get away from it at work. But I'm really excited to sit down here today and discuss it with our four great panelists. So welcome to this Intelligence Squared and Southbank Centre event. I am Madhumita Murgia. I work for the Financial Times, where I'm the AI editor. Tonight's debate and discussion comes at a really timely moment. In recent months, we've all seen the rise of large language models. This has become part of our public lexicon. Chatbots like ChatGPT, Bard, Pi, and Claude are software that we have, most of us probably already played with and used. And they've sparked this sort of magical amazement, but also alarm about the future possibilities of this technology of artificial intelligence, which really has evolved over the last 30 years. There are some experts who worry now that as AI becomes ever more sophisticated, it's going to pose an existential threat to humanity, to our species, and who fear that machines could potentially become so powerful that we no longer control them. On the other hand, we have experts, more optimistic ones, who argue that the benefits of AI are so great and will so far outweigh the risks that we should be pursuing this goal, and that we can design systems that are ethical, that have values that align with humanity, and safeguards to ensure their responsible use. So which way is it going to go? Who's right? So we have 4 speakers here today who are going to talk us through what they think and help us to better understand the issues and maybe go away and have our own view tonight. We have here Stuart Russell, who is a brilliant professor of computer science at the University of California, Berkeley, who wrote the original textbook on AI and is the author of several best-selling books, including his recent title, Human Compatible, AI and the Problem of Control. We have next to me Eleanor Drage, who is the co-host of the Good Robot podcast and senior research fellow at the University of Cambridge's Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, where she applies ethics to artificial intelligence. Thanks for joining us, Eleanor. To my left, we have Carl Miller, who's the research director and co-founder of the Centre for the Analysis of Social Media at the think tank Demos. He's the author of The Death of the Gods, the new global power grab, and the host of the new podcast Power Trip, which examines the race to develop AI for Intelligence Squared. And finally, we have Sougwen Chung, an artist and a researcher whose work focuses on how emerging technologies like AI impact creativity and the arts. A former research fellow at MIT Media Lab, she's considered a pioneer in the field of human-machine interaction and collaboration. So thank you all so much for joining us. I want to start by asking you to put your stake in the ground, make an opening statement. Give us your thoughts on where you stand on this question that we're here to discuss. We'll start with Stuart. Is AI an existential threat to humanity?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's move on.
So interestingly, I found myself agreeing with both sides of the argument that you presented at the beginning, right? Yes, AI could present an extinction risk to humanity, but yes, AI has enormous upsides, and yes, it's possible to develop in a way that's safe. So let me talk about how that works. So first of all, just to reassure everyone, the word threat does not mean definite extinction. So we still have a chance. And also, it's important to point out, because there's a lot of confusion on this point, we're not talking about AI as it exists today, as if even if we completely stopped developing the technology any further, the technology we already have would necessarily lead to extinction. But some people who I respect a great deal think that we might have as little as 5 years before we reach the point where we have to be very immediately concerned about that risk. And so this suggests that we have to act now because we don't know how long it's going to take to develop those safeguards that you mentioned, to develop a form of AI that we can guarantee is going to be safe and beneficial. And at the moment, the kind of AI that we're developing is absolutely not safe and beneficial. Partly because we have absolutely no idea how it works, partly because we are taking absolutely no steps to ensure that it's safe. We're taking steps that maybe increase its safety a bit, but they don't work very well for reasons we can get into. So that means that, if you think about nuclear power stations,
No one is coming forward and saying, okay, I have a design for a safe nuclear power station. There are just a bunch of people saying, I wonder what happens if we pile together lots and lots of enriched uranium. Is that okay if we do that? Right? So that's the situation we're in right now. So why is there a risk? Well, obviously, and many other species on Earth could tell you this, because they've been on the receiving end of it, intelligence is what gives us power over the world and over those other species. And if we build systems that are more intelligent than human beings, then you face this question. How do we maintain power forever over entities that are more powerful than ourselves? So anyone who has a really watertight answer to that question, just let me know, and then we can all go home.
Isn't the answer don't let them get more intelligent than us? Or is that not going to happen?
So that's a question, right? Are we necessarily going to succeed? And that's one argument that people put forward, which is sort of the following, right? So we're driving a bus, we've got all of humanity as passengers, we're heading straight for a cliff, and the bus driver says, don't worry, I'm pretty sure we're going to run out of gas before we get to the cliff. Or petrol, I should say, before we get to the cliff, right? That's not a very convincing argument for how we should manage the affairs of the human race. And this is not a new problem, right? Even Alan Turing, who founded computer science in 1936, said, if we succeed, we should have to expect the machines to take control. And it's hard to see how that wouldn't happen, because the way we build machines is basically we give them objectives, and then they figure out how to achieve the objectives, and then off they go. And it's extremely hard to write down an objective that happens to be completely and correctly aligned with what we want the future to be like. It's very hard for us to figure out what that is. And if we write it down wrong, if we leave anything out, then there are simple arguments showing that we could have a catastrophic outcome, right? These are systems that can, if they're more intelligent than us, synthesize biological weapons that can put us all out of business, change the oxygen content of the atmosphere, change the temperature of the planet to suit them rather than us. And all of these would lead to extinction. So if you want to deny that there's a risk, you have to argue one of two things, right? First of all, you have to argue that we're never going to create that kind of AI in the first place. And right now, when you look at the tens of billions of pounds that are being spent on creating exactly this kind of AI every month, it's kind of hard to argue that those tens of thousands of brilliant people are all going to fail. Another way would be that, yeah, we're going to create super intelligent AI, but it's just going to be safe even if we don't make any attempt to ensure that, right? It's just naturally that intelligent things are always nice, right? And I've heard this argument. Who believes that, right? Not many people. And there's a third thing that we have to do, right, to make sure that there's no risk. Even if the AI systems we make are super nice, how do we make sure that people who don't want to use super nice AI systems never get to create AI systems that are harmful, right? So there's a number of conditions we have to ensure. So it's a fairly narrow path that we have to tread in order to avoid this threat.
Okay, so work cut out for us there. Thank you. We'll come back to you on laying out those risks a bit more clearly and how we go from a computer software to changing the temperature of our atmosphere. But we'll go to Eleanor next. Eleanor, tell us where you stand on this question of whether AI is an existential risk.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I was actually here last Saturday at 4 a.m. At some reggae night, so it's nice to be sitting here. And I'm taking notes, not texting today. A couple of things. Firstly, this question of control and power. You know, humanity, or certainly during the Enlightenment, there was this desire to control nature, to control parts of humanity. And this is a really negative desire. What we need to do is learn how to live symbiotically with the planet, with technology, in a responsible way. So I think the rhetoric around control can be really dangerous. The second thing is it's not necessarily true that no one's doing anything. Ethicists are being fired, the top ethicists from Google and Microsoft. And so those are the same kind of companies that are starting to care about existential risks, but they're also getting rid of the people who have been trying to promote the ethical development of technology. And, you know, I'm not alone. I've been working with wonderful people who've been doing this for a long time, who are frustrated that they're not being listened to. But on the question of you know, is there an existential risk? Yes, but we need to think about it differently. So we need to think about the existential risk metonymically through the component features of AI. So you've got the data labelers who are subjected to really intense and horrible work practices. So we need to think about the labor issues in relation to existential risk. We need to think about silicon monocrystals and the environmental effects of AI. For every 5 questions you ask ChatGPT, it uses a liter of water. We need to think about engineers, about who goes into engineering and the values that they have, and the way that they can tell a company when they don't agree with what is going on. And we also need to think about linguists going into working in AI and trying to find different relationships between AI and language so that ChatGPT doesn't come up with really negative things. And finally, it's also an existential threat that consumers don't understand and are being sold products that are harmful. So those are the kinds of existential threats I think we need to be thinking with. And the reason why I think this is the way we should be thinking about existential harm is because fear is paralyzing. When we are afraid, we just seize up and can't do anything. We need to be able to know how we can respond to AI and where we can participate and make change.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Carl, tell us what you think.
Hi, everyone. Before I answer, I want to ask you all a question, actually. Have you come here today because you feel anxious or nervous or afraid?
I think I hear broadly more.
We hear yeses, we hear no's, we hear rumblings. A couple of months ago, I felt maybe in the same as I think many people might have come here today feeling, which is almost like a kind of fawn kind of picking your way through this kind of darkened woods. You know, you kind of feel these like huge forces of social change kind of rippling around you, kind of changing, kind of coming in and out of focus and kind of changing the world in ways which are actually very unclear and very mysterious. And you kind of don't really understand the nature of these forces. You don't understand where they're coming from. You don't understand what they're doing. But you know that they're kind of having some form of impact on your life, which you know is very important. And that's where I started. So at the end of all of this, actually, the reason I'm here is I've just finished a podcast with Intelligence Squared looking at this idea of power. I'm very glad it's already been raised. This idea of power and how that's changing in the age of AI. And talking to all kinds of people that were bullish, people that were scared, people that were gloomers and doomers and boosters, and all these people across the landscape of AI. And on this question of existential risk, I think there are 3 things I want to bring back from that journey to tell you all. Number 1, the models today are not posing an existential risk to humanity. Like, they actually look so much smarter than they really are. Like, I know we've all asked ChatGPT questions. I know it's so unbelievably uncanny how human they feel and how general purpose they are. But as one technologist, one of the kind of like developers of one of these models said to me, it's sophisticated autocomplete. Like, the thing has just swallowed up so much of human culture and is unbelievably good at predicting what it thinks a human being would say. And that makes us think that somewhere when we're talking to GPT, somewhere glimmering in that model, maybe there's a kind of proto-sentient kind of peering back out at us, and that's just not true. We're miles away from that so far. So these models that we currently use, yeah, they can do tons of things which are probably damaging. They can entrench inequalities. They can automate industries. They can get rid of certain tasks and certain jobs. So much damage for sure. Existential risk, probably not. But, and this is point number 2, where it's going to go, I think, is unknowable even to the very people that are developing these technologies. And as one person said, it's like, so one of the other people building one of these models, and I'm quoting you directly now, everyone, it's like peering into the mind of an alien. They said, you know, we are right now, in terms of understanding how these models work, it's like alchemy. It's not even medicine. So it was really weird what happened. The same approaches in machine learning that we've used actually for a couple of decades now, neural networks, and suddenly you started shoving more compute power and more data into these things, and the performance just suddenly took off in this way which was pretty exponential. And that was really not anticipated. A lot of people working in AI didn't think this was going to happen. They didn't think that these models that they're seeing now, they'd see in their lifetimes. And that's meant that on this kind of currently, we don't really know but some form of exponential kind of flight path arcing up into the sky, it's unbelievably difficult for us to know where these models are going to get to and how quickly. And that's meant, and this is an irony, that in a world as full of data and as full of models and as full of predictive analytics and all these intelligent people as we have right now, is actually one that is also progressively getting more unknowable, more difficult to predict, and actually more mysterious to all of us. And that means, even though the models today are sophisticated autocomplete, what they're going to look like tomorrow and in the weeks and months and years later, those are the ones that we have to start worrying about. And the last point I'll make is that I think, we're going to try, I think, in this panel to find the areas where we agree and disagree and try and show them all to you. But it will be an extreme voice to not call for some form of control and some form of kind of sane intervention to make sure that these technologies can't be used, whether in existential ways or not, just used in ways which entrench inequality and cause harm and exacerbate all the things that are bad about society at the moment. But if we were to supplant ourselves, I think actually to certain parts of Silicon Valley at the moment, that voice actually would be there and it would be pretty loud. There are people, and some of the people that actually sit at the heart of AI industries and AI development, that do not think that government or civic society or journalists or others actually should be part of the conversation or should be part of the decision-making around how to control AI. This is a dominant and very vocal and very loud voice over there. And the last point I'll make in my introduction is, we've just passed the Online Safety Act. It's been 10 years where we have tried to get social media under control. And over that time, where a bunch of people have told us that if we did try and regulate, it would shut down innovation and it would destroy business models, over that time, when we've asked nicely and nicely and nicely and then less nicely, and finally we've regulated, that time we've had a genocide, we've had rapacious polarization, we've had politics crumbling in on themselves all over the world. So much social damage has been caused by that industry, I think, developing and being used in ways which weren't controlled by democratic authorities. And compared to social media looks pretty tame, actually, compared to what AI might do in the future. So we must remember, whatever we do next, we have to remember those last 10 years. And we have to remember the kind of stories that Silicon Valley has told. And I really don't think whatever we decide to do, and I know there's tons of great benefits of AI, and we'll dwell on those as well, but we mustn't allow, I think, a very small number of kind of technologists and innovators to control the debate going forwards, because that is going to be not just a grim, but actually a very scary world going into the future as well.
Thanks. You. So your view is, thank you. Whether existential or not, there are harms and risks today, and we should be looking at those before we even start to consider what the next era of technology is going to bring, because those harms are already here, and it's already taken us 10 years to regulate the last technology that came along.
Yeah, so two things. Firstly, we don't even have to start peering at agents inside of the machines. The machines have learned from us. it's our assumptions, it's our prejudices, it's our inequalities, it's our weak media environments, it's our flawed information environments in general that are already being exploited and abused in ways. So, you've got recruitment algorithms that are, say, continuing to suggest a male candidate. It's because they've learned those recruitment environments already prefer male candidates. Like, we've already got bail, no bail algorithms, and one of the reasons they've been in the United States, and one of the reasons they've been deployed is because of the prejudices and assumptions of judges already. So we don't have to look to an existential threat to already see threats, for sure. But whether we look at existential threats or whether we look at threats today, I think one thing is absolutely clear, and that is that there is a dynamic which has happened over the last 10, 20 years where emerging technologies have raced away from democratic control. And that, to me, and I hope to many people in this audience, is an unacceptable situation. Because it is not going to be companies, and it's not going to be technologists that make sure that these things are both developed and used in ways which respect human rights and respect many of the fragile, sometimes very fragile, kind of social accords and accomplishments which we've had. And if we're going to build a world we all want to live in, it's going to be one where a lot of voices that were very quiet over the last 10 years have to get a lot louder.
So we've talked about sort of the impact of AI in things like nuclear, climate change. We've talked about society more broadly, politics, misinformation. Let's look at something, a totally different aspect of society that AI has already begun to impact really, really rapidly, something that's also close to my heart, which is creativity in the creative industries. Tell us, Sougwen, about where you stand and how this debate affects you and people that you work with.
I'd love to. What an interesting question. I think I'm actually going to answer no, even though I agree with so much of what's already been said, because I think what the question of existential risk kind of I think promotes the sense of fear, which I don't think is really useful in how we navigate the widespread deployment of AI across society, but also in image generation and music. I think as an artist, it's sort of, I always find it funny when I speak about this topic in front of an audience, because most of the time I'd much rather, I make art so I don't have to speak, but I think I'm honored to be sort of not representing artists, because I would never claim to do that, but sort of bringing in what art can facilitate in the very serious topic of AI in society, AI systems in society. I've been working with and building my own robotic system for the past 10 years, exploring this, I think, existential uncertainty. I think there's a great existential uncertainty involved in how we manage, how we work with, and how we build our own, hopefully, AI systems. So I trained a robotic arm on a neural network on 2 decades of my own drawings to try to examine what that means to work with a digital and embodied other. And I think I did that 10 years ago because in 2015, the uncertainty around the effects of AI taking over a game called YK, AlphaGo, was really very prominent in the news. And in 2015, the top Go player in the world lost. So in that editorializing of the technology, we already lost the battle against AI. But in that moment, the top Go player in the world talked about how he saw the beauty of the non-human move. And that's really been a through line and a thread to what I've been trying to explore with art practice over the past few years. And through that, I think I've been able to find a comfort with navigating uncertainty that I think it's really important to hold steadfast today, to not be so alarmist while a very serious topic, to really break down what we mean when we talk about, when we refer to the machine as them, where those fears come from, and how we regulate these systems that are really more intertwined with us as humans as we would like to think.
And we've been talking a lot about control because obviously the question here is it going to wipe us all out? And so obviously the first thing we think about is how do we stop that? But have you, through your practice, seen some form of augmentation? Is AI in some way making you more or better artist? Or, I don't know, someone different than what you were without
That implies
the
I was a good artist to begin with, but yeah. No, I think so much of what I've been interested in creating my own dialogue with these systems is learning a little bit more about what building these systems really entail. So by working with my own data sets, I'm able to really have a different experience of the labor and the classification and the brokenness and the fragility of a lot of these systems. I think what's been really incredible has been learning about the fragility of the system, the materiality of working with and building a machine. I think it's been really fascinating to work with the collaborative AI agent that is trained on my own data in order to train my own muscle memory and adapt how I work with my body with the data set. So I think that's really different from a lot of the generative AI through Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, and Midjourney today. I think it's really a image generation program that's trained on photography, but there's so many different types of creativity, music, painting, performance art that really can't be encapsulated by this creative AI that's become such a contemporary hot topic. So I think a lot of the alarmist existential questions around the creative field exist around the automation of human creativity, and I just don't think we've even scratched the surface of what that could mean for feedback with these systems.
That leads actually to my next question, and it might sound like a sort of vague finger-wavy, hand-wavy thing about definitions, but I think that word existential can have lots of meanings, particularly when we're talking about how is AI going to change or kind of be an existential risk to us. And I think there's everything on the spectrum from being like literally extinct and wiped out to how it changes creativity and maybe makes us less creative, and then also things like our politics and our society. So I wondered if each of you could jump in on what existential risk you're most worried about, or that we should all be thinking about and putting our energy towards solving. Maybe the right answer is the one where we all get wiped out, but like I'm just interested in your various views on how we prioritize if people here are kind of worried today. You know, what should we start by trying to solve? Which existential risk? Who wants to jump in first?
So I actually just want to push back a little bit against something you were trying to get a rise out of Carl, I think, with this idea that because there are present harms, we should therefore not think about future harms. And
did I fall for it?
I don't think you did. No, you didn't. So but this is a thing that's going around. There's many articles being published along these lines, and I think it's to me it's actually hurtful because it's implying that I don't care about present risk because I'm thinking about future ones. If you said to climate change researchers who are worried about a climate catastrophe, you're evil, because there are present-day harms from acid rain. Therefore, you shouldn't be thinking about climate change. I mean, I don't hear that argument being made in public, and I don't see why we should be making that argument about future risks from AI.
But aren't climate change activists looking at, researchers, they're looking at present-day harms? I mean, we are living in the sixth.
Some of them are, and some of them are looking at much bigger harms in the future, like what happens if there's 50 meters of sea level rise because Greenland melts.
To me, those are very connected things.
And so are these.
Currently, we're seeing this massive rise in sea levels.
And so are these, right? The harms that we're seeing now come precisely from AI systems that are misaligned with the notion of helping humanity. They're literally specified objectives in, for example, you give the example of resumes, right? And filtering of resumes is a well-known case where historical biases in the data sets creep in. So how does this happen? It's not, I mean, the algorithm itself is basically just minimizing least squares. So it's an algorithm that is more than 200 years old, and it's completely neutral. The problem is it's the wrong objective, because you don't just care about agreeing with the historical data, which is what you're training the algorithm to do. You actually care about fairness. And so you're putting in the wrong objective, and it's not surprising that you're getting bad outcomes. And that's exactly the risk that we're concerned about as AI systems get more and more powerful. So it's precisely a continuum, and rather than sort of trying to pit one group of researchers against another, actually see that these researchers are facing the same problem, just on different timescales. And
So
we need to work on
as a
both, of
scientist-
course. We can work on two problems at once.
Yeah.
Just like we can work on police brutality is also a problem. That doesn't mean we can't work on bias in AI systems because there's police brutality. So the form of the argument doesn't really hold water in my view.
So for you as a scientist, would you say that your focus is most on those future risks and how we can today redesign systems so we never get to that point? Is that top of mind for you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think this is the thing that I am equipped, and I've thought about this, so this is what I choose. I'm not a climate researcher. I've had conversations with people who say, why aren't you working on climate? And I said, well, I would if I knew enough about it to be actually helpful.
I guess the more relevant question is, we have these generative AI systems today that, as you say, are misaligned in many ways in terms of their outputs with human values. So why not look at fixing that and talking about the power issue of the companies rather than thinking about what happens next? I mean, it's not a choice necessarily, but why?
No,
it's not a choice.
It's not a choice, and that's the wrong way to think about it, to even think that we need to choose between those two different problems. Like, the way I think about it, you've got where we are now, and you've got the singularity. And there's a journey that we're going to go on, and AI has become more capable. Now, I think it's a pretty extreme voice that would call for a chess computer to be put under government control. I also think it's an extreme voice that would call for a genuine 10,000 John von Neumann superintelligence to be given to absolutely everyone in the world to do whatever they want with in any way. That seems like a recipe for disaster as well. So there clearly has to be, in our futures, this kind of ratcheting of control where as systems become more capable and therefore the harm they might do becomes more powerful and more profound, we have to start increasing the control of them. Like their access has to be less. We have to start thinking about who can use them, why, where do they sit. I think that's totally inevitable. I think if we don't actually create that kind of ratcheting of control up, we're in real problem. And that doesn't force us to kind of choose between dealing with bias today and existential problems tomorrow. It actually forces us to deal with both by creating this kind of regime. And that actually is what worries me. And I hear you about fear. Because I will say one other thing is that every single person I've spoken to working on AI, working with AI, in the same breath as giving a warning, they will give you an amazing liberation. And in the same breath as the liberation, they'll give you a warning. That's the world we're living in. Both of those two things are happening at the same time, in the same moment. That's what's bewildering and, in fact, actually dizzying about the moment we're living in. But if we do not ratchet up that form of control, then we're just going to spiral off, I think, into having these kinds of technologies increasingly more powerful with actually no kind of straitjacketing, like kind of moral straitjacketing around them and how they're going to be used.
I also agree with Carl and Stuart that we need to do more hand-holding between people who look at the social effects of AI and the low probability, high impact events that Stuart was talking about, because the existential risks of the future are the harms of today. They are caused by injustices and problems in our contemporary institutions and the companies that create AI. They are part and parcel of the same problem. And actually, the centre that I work for at Cambridge, we look at the social issues, and downstairs they look at X risk. We have a kind of nice upstairs, downstairs thing going on. But they're also looking at volcanoes and whatnot. And We are trying now to have more conversations between both centers, and the things that we both are looking at that are, converge a bit are geopolitics, kind of geopolitical risks, and I think we'll talk about China in a bit. But I also wanted to say that we need to rethink the temporality of apocalypse. I don't think it's going to be sudden, immediate, like the books we read and the films that we watch. I think it's more akin to, there's a poem that I really like, and I'll just say an extract from it, and it goes, "This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper." It was written by T.S. Eliot, you might recognize it, called The Hollow Man, in that interwar period where we were wrestling with moral collapse, with not knowing what we really stood for. That was a total moment of annihilation, of existential fear. And I think it's going to be like that. We are living in this slow death where we have all these things that are really working to create chaos that happens before our eyes, and of course, environmental collapse is one of these key things. So AI is causing serious damage now, and it's just differentially experienced. If you're not somebody who is being subjected to voice technologies at border control to decide whether, as a migrant, you're telling the truth about your story, if you're not somebody that's being subject to sometimes humanitarian technologies that are being deployed in really high-risk environments, then you won't really feel that existential fear, that loss of livelihood and life. So it's happening now, but it's happening slowly. And this isn't maybe very optimistic, but I'm saying this because there are some leading thinkers in AI, like Nick Bostrom. I don't know whether you've come across his book, Superintelligence, who define existential risk really narrowly. So extinction events are ones where the whole of humanity dies, but also humanity's intelligence plateaus, as if the plateauing of intelligence is an existential risk. And really what they're concerned about is intelligence, intelligence above all else. And I think, really what makes life livable is not intelligence, it's a lot of other things. And intelligence is not something that the individual possesses, it's collective. I didn't get into Oxbridge first time or second time, but now I teach there. So it's definitely something that we need to rethink when we think about what makes a machine intelligent. And Bostrom said that genocide isn't an existential issue because it is a mere ripple on the surface of the great sea of life. And we see a lot of that kind of cruelty with people who define existential risks really narrowly. So I think we need to really be careful of that.
Thank you. So Gwen, do you have any thoughts on, maybe we can just move on slightly about what can be done about it? How do you coexist with these systems in a way that it doesn't feel like a threat to what you do or to creativity more broadly?
Again, I feel like this idea of threat and fear and hope in a lot of how AI is deployed in the world, I think we need practices to be able to understand, again, the material of the system, the material of the machine, the design of the algorithm, and I think that's something that art practice and sort of working with AI as a tool, collaborator, as something to break apart. And I think what that does in the world is it creates different entry points for thinking about these existential uncertainties in a way that's grounded in the technology of the day that can help shape different manifestations of that technology. I think a lot of times we've looked to, and maybe some of our fear originally came from science fiction. I know a lot of times, we talk about HAL, we talk about Terminator, maybe it's a bit pop culture, but this is an issue that affects everyone. So I think that's really shaped our cultural imagination around how we think about AI, and now artists, designers, everyone, if they so choose, can use the technologies today to understand these moments and how they actually work in culture. And I think that's really something that allows for the contradiction of fear and hope to manifest simultaneously. And without these practices, I think we're just listening to experts, and I just don't think that's enough, because there's always an agenda to anything anyone's trying to tell you, and I think our practice can help us navigate to the right questions.
Yeah, using something, technology is always animated, isn't it, by the people that use it, by all of us, and how we sort of perceive it and what we get from it. So without that, I guess we're never going to have an understanding of what it is we're afraid of and how we can fix it. But speaking of fixing, I'll come to Stuart and Carl. What can be done to prevent the risks that you're really worried about from materializing? What should we be doing?
So, I mean, this is a question that was being discussed, among small groups of people who were derided as being fringe loonies and so on for quite a long time. And then I think basically this year, partly because of the open letter asking for a pause and various other events, the so-called extinction letter of May of this year, it's now become a question that's widely accepted as important by governments, by companies, by civil society generally. And right now, I would say, if you think about analogies to other areas like aircraft or nuclear power, they iterated for a while on aircraft design and nuclear power plant design. Eventually, they found designs that had sufficient margin of safety. And in fact, the first designs that we approved for nuclear power stations had a mean time to failure of 10,000 years, which if you think that if you've got 1,000 of those, right, then you're going to have a failure every 10 years. So now we're up to 10 million years, and this is progress, right? And that's a really important lesson, that if you understand the physics, the components, the redundancy, the operating procedures, and so on, the materials and their properties, then you can actually have quantitative predictions of how safe is this system. We are nowhere close to that with AI. I have a student who's running a competition for people to find ways to get ChatGPT to break all of its training and tell you how to make chemical weapons, tell you how to commit suicide, and so on. Jesus. There are 130,000 jailbreaks in the database so far. Right? So that tells you how successful the these safety measures are. They're not very successful at all.
They're brittle and fragile.
And we don't have the physics. As Carl was saying, these things are totally mysterious. And so I think the right answer at the moment is to draw red lines. Right? What we have to get is a large fraction, actually, of that 10 billion a month that's going into creating super intelligent machines. We have to redirect that towards creating machines that are safe and beneficial. And the way to do that is by drawing red lines and saying, you need to demonstrate, just as the nuclear operators do and the aircraft designers do, you need to demonstrate that your system will never cross these lines. And if they do ever cross those lines, once they're deployed, they have to be immediately terminated and removed from the market. And the effect of that would be actually to require the companies to show that their systems are safe, which means they would have to design them differently. They would have to actually understand what they're doing. Imagine that. And I think there are a number of red lines. The systems should not replicate themselves. The systems should not break into other computer systems. The systems should not give advice to terrorists on how to build biological weapons, right? These are three examples that I think any politician can wrap their head around, and I think there's probably a growing consensus that we need these kinds of red lines. So that would be my policy recommendation. How we actually make AI systems safe and beneficial. So I have some ideas, and my publisher said I have to show you that as a book. It's with the ideas, and I actually wrote a new afterword.
What's it called?
It's called, for those of you who can't read the font from here, it's called Human Compatible, AI and the Problem of Control. So human compatible means compatible.
Available at all your good bookstores.
Yeah, wherever you get your.
And I think I'm supposed to sign some afterwards. But anyway, so this notion of compatible with human existence, right, is sort of a, I'm prodding in the eye my colleagues who've been building AI that, in my view, is not compatible with human existence. And why is that? And this goes back to, to Turing and even before that. If you go back to King Midas, right? King Midas said, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. And what happens? He tries to take a drink of water and his water turns to gold. He tries to eat an apple, the apple turns to gold. He turns to his daughter for comfort, his daughter turns to gold, right? He misspecified the objective. And that's the way we build AI systems, right? The large language models are designed to imitate human linguistic behavior, right? And that's a catastrophic recipe in itself. Social media algorithms that Carl mentioned were designed to maximize clicks or maximize engagement, the time you spend on the platform. That's a recipe for disaster. As we found out, those systems learn to manipulate humans. They learn to turn you into a more extreme and more predictable version of yourself so that they can monetize you better, right? And so we have to actually replace the entire technical foundation and methodology of AI to get rid of this idea that we should specify objectives and then the systems optimize those objectives. And there's a different way of doing it where, in fact, the system only has one objective, which is to be beneficial to humanity, but it knows that it doesn't know what that means.
So it experiences uncertainty.
So it's explicitly uncertain about that, and which causes it to be cautious, to ask permission, to defer to human control. All of those properties actually do not exist in the AI systems that we build today.
Beneficial to humanity is also something that is, it's very vague, because which bits of humanity is it going to benefit? And I definitely don't buy into the view that AI could get all our cups to overflow and make us all super productive, because technology has not been shown to reduce inequality in any way. So instead of just, benefiting humanity, the more radical among us think that AI should be built to promote justice. And if it doesn't promote justice, if it doesn't benefit the marginalized, if it doesn't try to work against structural inequality, then it's not good technology. And there are lots of really cool projects, like computer scientists who are trying to make algorithms reparative. Of course, reparations are super political anyway, so this is a political project. It always is. Even with projects that try to make AI neutral, they still have their own politics. And the problem is if we try to make a good system that's good for everyone, we will continue to make AI that's good for only a small group of people. We also need to encourage ethical whistleblowers. That's something that we can all do if we work in a tech company and we think something is being built that's not right. Like, that's how Cambridge Analytica there was a data scientist there who worked with a journalist called Carol Cadwallader, and that's how we all know about it. But when you're an engineer, when you're a mathematician, you're not taught to think, why am I solving this problem? Why am I trying to make this algorithm work? And we need to change computer science education, but also education for everyone. And I'm also working with the OCR, which is an exam board in the UK, trying to create PDFs for students and teachers and videos and other educational materials that helps students be better equipped to understand AI ethics issues. So there's loads of ways that, some of the things that Stuart was talking about are things that only a small amount of people can help solve. But there's loads of things that everybody else can do to get involved with, lots of cool projects. I'm also creating the world's first online open access tool that will help companies building AI to be consistent with the EU's regulation, which is, I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but it's a lot more pointed than the UK's, which is a bit kind of muffly. And what we're trying to do is inject in it a soulful, pro-justice course. And of course, we can only attract companies that care, but there are a lot of companies that care. Of course, there's lots that really don't. But what we want to do is have the tools there for companies that really want to be meaningful in the way that they create AI.
And Carl, I wanted to ask you
Yes.
about power.
Can I just
Power.
want to push back a little bit?
No, let me,
Against
Stuart, let me
something
push back
on-
first, and then you can push back afterwards.
Push back first, and then you.
What are you pushing back against? I'm
No,
just saying
I
nice
just actually
things.
want a chance
What's
to speak.
controversial about what she said?
I promise to be contrarian, so I'll try and be not really by explicitly disagreeing with anything anyone said, but actually just offering a note of optimism and even joy. We live in one of the most remarkable times, I think, that humanity's really gone through. And I think any age, and all the ones that have gone in the past, I think we're always gripped by, I'm a recovering historian, everyone, so you're going to have to indulge me. We're always gripped by what historians often call the kind of crushing condescension of the present. The idea that the struggles, problems, travails that we're going through now are preternaturally worse or more serious or more dangerous than the ones that have gone in the past. And anyone that's seen Oppenheimer here, or anyone that, say, has dwelt perhaps on what it felt like during the First World War or during the Industrial Revolution, can you imagine the kind of seismic changes happening to society during those moments? Can you imagine how scary and dangerous it must have felt during World War I as you saw the whole of the European continent rip itself apart, millions of people dead, for the first time, industrial war on our doorsteps? We're having to come to terms with that. Every generation has these kinds of problems. Every generation has really serious, scary stuff. And actually, overall, for all of the really bad things that humanity does, we do actually tend to prevail and be sane about these sorts of things. For all of this scary saber-rattling currently happening after the Ukraine invasion with nuclear weapons, we haven't used one since 1945. And we do have a counter-proliferation regime in place. And there are two things that we haven't heard enough about in this debate about AI. Number one is that for all the power concentrating in Silicon Valley, for all of these companies, for all of the inequalities it's creating, it's also, because these things are general purpose, they are allowing people to cause liberations that are just mind-boggling and you couldn't even possibly imagine. You go to India and you will hear people give a use case of a GPT where they've translated the arcane and labyrinthine Indian government website and translated it and turned that into something which farmers can use in order to access various kinds of grain subsidies. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these kinds of cases as well. And ultimately, I think to leverage those cases and steer around a lot of the kind of real problems that we have, the solution actually is pretty straightforward. We just got to make AI really boring. We've got to turn it into being a chartered accountant. We've got to have a Royal College of Algorithmists. We've got to institution build. We've got to do audits. We've got to have professional kind of codes of conduct. We've got to have checklists. We've got to do all the things that actually are annoying and boring and tedious in other parts of the world, but actually really important there. So we've got to turn this kind of white hot pace of innovation, all this technological change. Oh my God, it's so crazy, it's so different. And we've got to actually do the thing that's always been proven to be really difficult when it comes to technology, especially disruptive tech. And that's just build all the squishy, human, institutional, normative stuff as well to grow up around it. That's what we've got to do. If we do that with technology, it will become like the law.
But the question is, if companies have all the power today.
They don't. They don't have all the power. I completely refute this. This is what we heard 10 years ago. Look, I was in front of parliamentary select committees 10 years ago where politicians would tell me, how can we possibly regulate Facebook? You know, they're so powerful and they're so rich. It is nonsense for states to think that private companies are more powerful than they are. They never have been, they never will be. They might be rich, they might be global, but they do not have control of court systems, they do not have control of militaries, and they do not have control of compulsive taxation systems. Until those things happen, states will always be more powerful, vastly so.
But in the case of AI, they do have all of the knowledge. The systems are closed off.
Well, some are, some aren't. Some are open
We're saying
source.
that they don't even understand how they work, let alone regulate.
What we've just seen with the Online Safety Act is now it is Ofcom's statutory power to be able to request any data proportionate from any of the social media platforms. They don't have all the knowledge anymore. Now a state can require that knowledge if it thinks it's in its regulatory responsibilities to do so. And we're going to see, we can see the same for AI. Like, I think, like, states, public sector, all of us, we tell ourselves these kind of mythologies around disruptive technology, which are completely not true. Like, around that they're all so powerful and all based in this place, and we can't control them, and they got all the information. It's not true. It's not true. Like, democratic authorities working through states can control disruptive technology. That's always been the case. It will continue to be the case. What's really dangerous, actually, is if we tell ourselves the opposite. But far more so than the technology. That's what I'm scared of.
Do we all feel as optimistic that democratic governments and other
Thank you for the one person that applauded that.
are going to be able
Okay, so I
to
think
have a voice?
Carl successfully redirected the conversation.
Yeah.
I just did want to say to Eleanor, as far as I know, justice is beneficial to humanity. So I don't like the idea that you can be beneficial to humanity or you can have justice, but you can't have both. That seems wrong to me. In fact, I think you have to have justice if you're going to be beneficial to humanity.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you have to want something specific. And so to say we want something that benefits everyone often results in something that benefits a very small group of people. And we see that across the board.
But that's sort of a contradiction.
The whole point of,
anyway,
of asking for something that turns the tables away from inequality towards equality means that you're implementing equality measures. And it does just become quite political. But equality measures aren't about fairness. It's not about, oh, we want to create some kind of, utopia where everything is fair and good, because the world itself is so structurally unequal that we need to really move towards justice for the people that have been marginalized. That is why we need to have a pro-justice angle. No, not at all. I think that, justice for the people who have been structurally oppressed is good for everybody, unless you really hate people or something.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, in fact, I mean, if you take some forms of utilitarianism literally, right? I mean, I have this little story where, the owner of the robot that's managing their household comes home from work and says, "Oh, I'm really starving, haven't eaten today." And the robot says, "Well, actually, there are people in more need than you, so make your own dinner. I'm going off to such and such place to help them." And that's a literal, that robot is literally right.
I don't know. Utilitarianism is the worst. We shouldn't be deciding who gets food and who doesn't, who dies, who doesn't. It's just a really bad place to have ethics. Ethics is about living well. It's not about deciding who gets food and who doesn't. It's about how can we create a life that is good and worth living.
So I think that's a good point for final questions before we go to audience questions about our vision or your vision for let's say 5 years' time, because Stuart, you mentioned at the beginning that some people that you really respect say that 5 years could be a turning point for us. What is, for each of you, the sort of best case, as optimistic as we can be, scenario for what the world looks like with AI infused into it in 5 years' time? Where would you like to be? Should we start on this end with?
Sure, why not? Easy question.
And then we'll come to audience questions.
Yeah. So, again, I'm an artist on this panel, and I live my life from that lens and that practice. I think maybe I've mentioned this point before, but to reiterate, I think there's something that's about working with these tools and understanding and trying to learn a little bit more about what's going on under the hood. I think what that does, it really demystifies a lot of the, and maybe it what's the word, takes back some of the power and control into the user. Some of these systems are obviously incredibly powerful, but I think there's a lot of overlap, but a disagreement with what AI is in that space. I think there's no such thing as a single artificial intelligence because there's no such thing as a single natural intelligence. And what we do see in systems that are, and training data that's biased is we see that in play. I think what I'd like to see in the future is a demystification around what AI is and what it can be. I think a greater fluency around how we can use AI as a collaborator and take back a lot of the our agency in these systems by expanding our imagination of what it actually is. And by doing so, I think the conversation around AI is interesting because in some ways it decenters the human subject and human intelligence in a way that can be really philosophically and maybe creatively and spiritually valuable. What we're allowed to see through different AI systems is a little bit more about how natural systems work, about how large language models work, and through that we can expand our view. And I think having more people contribute to that through art practice, through working with these systems, we can actually shape a little bit of the technology that we're governed by in a way that we're not now.
Thank you. Carl?
I don't have kids, but when I do, I want one of them to come to me one day and say, I really want to be an AI engineer, but there's all that red tape.
Bureaucracy.
It's just really bureaucratic and there's all these rules. You've got to be a lawyer nowadays to be an AI engineer. That's all I want. I just want it to, and disruptive technology in general, I just want it to feel like it's just another institution which we have, which we control according to the powers which it can assume. I don't think that's an unreasonable request. And I think that, so I'll give you one of the kind of TLDRs of the Power series with Intelligence Squared. So you don't even have to listen to it, let alone read a book about it. Power's gone very wild. Power has assumed all these forms which are very strange. And in these strange new forms, which we often either misunderstand or overlook, it's kind of broken out of the bars that we've always built around power. You know, bars like the law, or norms, or professional standards, or expectations, lots of things. And we just need to recage it. Like, that's all we need to do. Like, we're never going to stop disruptive technology being disruptive. We're never going to, and I don't want, actually, ultimately, us to stop an exponential arc into the sky either, as long as we can somehow make the squishy human bars of that cage of power somehow move exponentially as well. That's all I want.
Thank you. Eleanor, and then Stuart, and then we'll go.
Yeah, so ideal, utopian, 5 years, could be 10, 50. There's loads more tech unions, and everyone joins a tech union.
Yes. Lots more unions.
Great.
That's the one agreement today.
The panel. Second thing, the police, border control, and prisons can't use AI until they sort their shit out. You know, you shouldn't be an institution that can use AI unless you really don't have a strong track record of extreme violence and structural inequality. They start using AI to break up families and to shut down protests, which is what's happening in the UK at the moment. Regulation clamps down on pseudoscience, so engineers that fiddle around trying to use AI to expose someone's sexuality or gender from looking at their face. Perhaps if gender studies was taught in computer science, which is my dream, and also actually we are doing at Cambridge, which is great. And if machine learning wasn't the only way of building AI, if we had other modes of creating intelligent systems, artificially intelligent systems, if we worked with artists and creatives and designers and communities to think about what it means to create something that is artificially intelligent. And that the AI arms race, which is this kind of the fear that China is going to overtake us in the race to create the best AI as quickly as possible, if that dies down, because it's so dangerous on a number of levels and it results in xenophobia and anti-Asian racism, it also promotes the move fast and break things approach, which we're trying to get rid of, so that we can make sure that AI is created slowly, carefully, safely. And of course, my last great wish is that ethicists stop being fired by companies who later sign letters and claim to care. So those are my wishes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Stuart.
So I think everyone has really contributed amazingly to this discussion. And I just want to further Carl's point. So I was talking to one of my nuclear engineering colleagues about the prospects for fusion, which I sort of do every 10 years, and it's usually the same conversation. And he pointed out that regulation of nuclear power is such that for every pound of nuclear power station, there are 7 pounds of paper.
That's my new favorite stat.
Right? So this is what we want kind of for AI. I mean,
yeah.
we can have online PDFs, but exactly, we need a regulatory environment that that ensures that people understand what they build, and if they don't, we don't change the regulation so that they can build things that they don't understand. It's the other way around. We say what we want. They have to meet those requirements or they don't get to build their systems, and it's as simple as that. So I want to look a little bit more than 5 years into the future and just assume that we have created extremely powerful AI systems. We have figured out how to control them and make them beneficial. And then the question is, can we coexist successfully with this? Think of it as another species, if you like. What kind of symbiosis can exist with that technology? And I've run workshops where I've invited futurists, AI researchers, economists, science fiction writers to describe the successful symbiosis. Because for sure, in science fiction, the vast majority of stories are dystopic. And Wall-E is one example where the human race is infantilized, which is a different kind of existential risk. It's not extinction, but we would say that's a dead end for humanity that we can't go into. What I was hoping, basically, was to lock all those people into a room and not let them out until they came out with a positive vision. But then COVID happened just in time, so I couldn't lock them in a room. I could only lock them in a Zoom room, which doesn't work nearly as well. But honestly, after 4 workshops, there were no positive visions.
Well, I did my PhD in science fiction written by women writers across Europe and globally, and there's loads of amazing utopian or ways of imagining how we can build better futures. It's just that they're written by kind of minority writers and they're not really read. So if you need more people, I can certainly find them for you.
In fact, we did invite several women writers, including Kanta Dihal was part of the workshops as well, who you know very well. And you know, there are well-known examples of not dystopic futures, but they still can't solve the problem of how do people find roles for themselves in this new world. And if you look at Star Trek, if you look at Ian Banks's culture novels, which I highly recommend, they're really interesting, but the only people who really find value in life are the ones who are in Starfleet, or Contact, as it's called in the culture novels.
Special circumstances.
Yes, special circumstances, exactly. And this is a question that I don't think we have solved yet. And I think we need the artists, the writers, the filmmakers to help us figure this out, because it's hard to fashion a transition to a future when you have no idea where that destination is or what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think this is really important. The last point I want to make is, if there is no successful symbiosis, the AI systems should, if they're well designed, should figure that out and say, bye folks, sorry, we have to leave because we're just not good for you. And we will do everything to keep them. That's the weird thing, right? They are telling us that they are bad for us, and we will try to stop them from leaving. So I will be happy if the AI systems are trying to leave. I think that would be a good sign.
That's amazing. So you spent your whole career building these systems, but you think maybe the ultimate utopia is them turning themselves off?
Yeah, and I think that there would be a lesson for humanity in that, and it may be a turning point that we didn't anticipate.
Can you imagine the existential angst if we all come back to this stage in 5 years' time because the AI systems and their first act of true intelligence is to check out of current society?
Okay, on that note, I'm going to turn to all of you, and feel free to throw all your questions out at this great group here. I think there's somebody in the audience.
Hi there, in the front row.
Hello.
Oh,
Okay,
hi.
Yeah, hi. I'm in the front row to your left.
Okay, hello.
Hi. Dean Bubley, I'm a technology analyst. A question on energy use. All of the current powerful AIs use huge amounts of energy, certainly for training. But there's a finite amount of energy, and we can't just automate creating new wind farms and grids and so on. So is there not a sort of almost like a, I suppose, circuit breaker in the existential risk from AI? There's just not enough energy to get to that super intelligent existential risk.
Thank you. Who wants to answer?
Well, there's also this circuit breaker in that we might actually just pull the plug out. No, but genuinely, I mean, if we're creating machines that have sufficient agency to mean that we actually can't stop what they do, that's because we've designed them to be able to act in worlds where we can't stop what they do. But actually, like, there's one of the things that we never discuss is the way that this disruptive technology bounces and collides off a lot of others. And probably the two others, Stuart, I mean, I know you're probably a great expert in this, but I mean, to me, like, quantum and nuclear fusion seem to be the two others that seem to be part of this story in ways which is very hard to work out.
Yeah, I think that the press tends to somewhat overestimate the energy consumption. For example, they complained a lot about how much energy was used to train GPT-4, and it was a lot. But it was about the same as we used to fly between San Francisco and California in one day, right? So
Between San Francisco
and Los Angeles in California, right? So just the planes going up and down in California use more energy in one day than was used to train GPT-4 by a large margin. And some of the claims I've seen about how much energy the system's using, they're wrong by 5 orders of magnitude. So we have to keep things in perspective a little bit. Probably a more important point is the reason we use so much energy to train these systems is because the algorithms are really, really stupid. They require far more training data than humans. Humans get by with 20 watts, right? Not megawatts or gigawatts, 20 watts. To learn what a giraffe is, you can show a child one little cartoon picture in a picture book, and they've learned what a giraffe is, and they will reliably recognize giraffes for the rest of their lives. They don't need millions and millions and millions of training examples. So the likely fact right now is we have far more computing power than we need to create super intelligent machines. We're just not using it very well. And the likely evolution of the field is that as we build systems that are much more data efficient in how they learn, we will end up using less and less and less energy to create more and more and more intelligence.
It's already getting a lot more efficient, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
Smaller models with the
factors of 1,000 more efficient than we were a few years ago.
Yeah.
Of course, just comparing it to planes, we also need to stop. Just because it's as bad as a plane doesn't mean that it's okay. So when we make those comparisons, I think we need to be really careful too.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? Oh, I can see better. Should we have? I think maybe we can just choose. You guys can choose because I can't see very well, and we can move to the back as well, not just the front. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My question: when you talk to these researchers, these experts in AI, do they usually think that we're maybe just a question of scale, away from general intelligence, like we just have to make things bigger, we need to give them more data, or do they tend to think that we still need to develop 2 or 3 really, really good ideas? I mean, Stuart, you spoke of 5 years. Is that just if we increase scale, or is there some uncertainty there? We need to come up with something really good for them to become dangerous.
It's a great question, and I think it's not scale. It's 2 or 3 really good ideas. My late colleague, John McCarthy, was asked this question in 1977, and he said, anywhere between 5 and 500 years, and we need, I think, 1.7 Einsteins and 3 Edisons, or something like that. I forget exactly. But the core of what's happening right now is we've got large language models, we've got other forms of large-scale learning systems, and we're trying to figure out how do we couple those into more complex kinds of AI systems. For example, systems that can plan into the future, which large language models are not particularly good at doing, but you can couple, and call the large language model many times as a subroutine of a planning algorithm and get long-term plans out of that. And people are trying all kinds of things, committees, armies of large language models, organized hierarchically. You name it, people are trying it. And there's, as I said, tens of billions of pounds a month going into AGI development. So I think you would be foolish to say, despite all that, we're just going to fail. But I take your point. It's hard to give a timeline based on any kind of quantitative predictions.
Thank you.
We shouldn't underestimate the unbelievable gravitational pull of Silicon Valley to attract the smartest people in the world. And the previous generation were all designing basically ways to get us to click on stuff. And now actually, in some ways, again, I'm optimistic in the sense I think like some of the kind of most powerful, formidable intellects in the world are really tangling with these questions to do with the new ideas. I think it would be folly for us not to think that those new ideas are going to happen with this concentration of people, capital, data, and visibility all concentrating in the ways that we see it happening now.
Thank you.
So many questions.
Yeah, it's great. Let's pick somebody
hello?
towards, where are we? Oh, can we pick somebody later from the middle or the back after this? Because we've only had people from the front.
So,
Thank you.
my name's David Wood, chair of London Futurists. My question's about the pace of change. Eleanor had this great quote from T.S. Eliot, not with a bang, but with a whimper. We could also quote Hemingway, whose answer to how some character became bankrupt was slowly and then quickly. And I'm wondering, what is the pace of AI change likely to be? Because if it's the former, then Carol's optimism might be correct, that we might manage to somehow figure it all out in this slow pace, and it might take 10 years as it's taken us to figure out the online harms bill, but that will be enough. Although I'm not convinced that governments have made such a great job of reining back the climate change. It seems to me that the actual pace of change in AI is often much more like the slow followed by fast. If we look at the progress with playing Go, in 2013, everybody said it's at least 10 years away. Then Google's software beat the European champion in November, but the world champion was not impressed because he could see that it was playing relatively poorly. But then in just a few months, it got so much better, so much more quickly, and other AI changes have done the same. So can the panel offer their views? Will the pace of AI be so quick that it's going to require politicians to step up their act as never before? Or is there going to be plenty of time for us to muddle it through in the kind of happy way that Carol's been suggesting?
Okay, how urgent is the problem? Do we think it's going to be slow and all at once, or do we see it being a sort of gradual?
I think it's actually happening quite quickly, if I'm honest. I will say that as a little bit of a nod to what Carl's saying too, I've also seen the swell of talent that gravitates towards Silicon Valley, having lived in San Francisco briefly as well. And I've also seen the increase in homeless tents and Silicon Valley's ability to solve its own problems on its doorstep. So yeah, I think it's rapidly accelerating, but we need guardrails, we need more interdisciplinary conversation, artists, futurists, sociologists, lawmakers involved in that to regulate and
Thank you.
contain.
We'll take one more question and then wrap up, because I think we're coming to the end of our time. Where have we got? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. A question specifically for you, Sougwen, because as a designer and artist, and on the back of the comment you just made about bringing in diverse voices to try to find a way forward with AI, what views might you have on democracy and how we educate publics around the world around the good and the bad around AI? Because, of course, while tonight is super interesting, we're somewhat of a self-selecting group in this room. There's a lot of people who are not here tonight who aren't maybe as articulate on AI as they should be. Do you have any views on how you might design a process or what mechanism would bring in everyone into this conversation rather than just us here tonight?
I think that's a great question. I think it happens and it begins in school. I think obviously we have access to so much information. We have access to AI courses at Stanford. We have access to so much technology. I think it's about getting children involved in the ground floor, but also one of the reasons we're here and concerned about AI is because of the proliferation of these tools. So the access, I don't think, is the issue. I think it's the curriculum, the public knowledge of the fragility of these systems versus its ability to kind of automate creativity. I think that's a really enticing and kind of alarming notion right now. I think we need to shift the public's idea away from that to what are ways to break it? How can we really combine our traditional means of expression with these systems that are readily available?
Thank you so much for that. We'll wrap up there, and then there'll be some book signing after, I think, if you want to stay around and talk to our panelists in person. But thank you for all your really diverse viewpoints and for arguing at times, but also bringing so much kind of thought and new idea to this discussion. I kind of read about this day in and day out, and it's my day job, but I think there's been so much food for thought. And I hope you can all go away and kind of develop your own views and perspectives on this topic. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks all. Come and grab me outside.